Hello again, people, and this is Chris again, the 30th of October 2021. Well, you can see that on my screen to the right of me. This series of transmissions on ham radio particularly was started by the late Tony Sanderson, who had my call sign back in the early 70s when he started the tradition of crossbands and late night discussions. It was carried on by Dave VK3ASC between about 1980 and last year. And now I seem to have taken it on. We have a regular Saturday night discussion at about 11 p.m. Melbourne time. It's now 9:29, and at 9:30 every week I go on and produce about 90 minutes worth of pre-recorded material intended to get conversations going, and I sincerely hope I can do that with tonight's effort. I'll just check that we've got streaming. It seems that everything is working well. We're actually streaming a bit faster in terms of throughput this week than last. We're streaming up at the 7.5 megabits per second. So I'll go on the air. The time being 9:30, it's time for me to say hello. This is VK3AML in Burwood East with the regular Saturday night test transmission of various pre-recorded materials. And after 11 p.m. we'll be taking a call back. Hopefully a QSO will ensue as a result of the video material that I'll be streaming until then tonight. Two items. One, the much delayed high quality video coverage of Peter Parker VK3YE's QRP by the Bay in February of last year, 2020, in which many people I know who are listening will see themselves. Jeff VK3VJS, Adam VK3SKT was in it, Steve VK3SL, Dave VK3ASC, the whole group really. So I've thrown that together for a 15-minute video to get things started with material that's pertinent to amateur radio, which of course we're on at 147.475 at the moment. If you want to look in on this stream, please Google VK3AML 30 October 2021. That phrase to Google to bring up our live video stream, on which you'll not only hear but see the people who are talking tonight. Google the phrase VK3AML 30 October 2021. One bit of news before I start. Tom VK3FTOM has asked me to mention that on Tuesday, Cup Day, the 2nd of November, this Tuesday coming, at Columbia Park, Gels Road, Wheelers Hill. That's Columbia Park, Gels Road in Wheelers Hill. There'll be a get-together, an informal get-together of hams operating from tables hopefully 1.5 metres apart as of 10 a.m. on Cup Day. So I'll be there certainly with Chris VK3CJN, and I'll be bringing some VHF gear plus a tablet computer on which we can transmit pictures of the people who are actually there at the time on our regular 2-metre frequencies. Again, Columbia Park for a ham confab to which everybody's invited. Columbia Park, Gels Road, Wheelers Hill. It's organised by VK3FTOM and it starts 10 a.m. Tuesday. Okay, with that, I'll go over to the coverage of Peter Parker VK3YE's QRP by the Bay at Chelsea last February, but one. QRP by the Bay, a ham radio confab organised by Peter Parker at Victory Park, Chelsea. And here we are. What do we see first? We see a guy with a kite up his bum, and I presume he has a wire attached to it, so I'm not quite sure what happened to that or the person concerned. We were looking for the group at this stage, which was early on the day, and eventually found them all sitting under the awning. This is what's called the jerkiest dolly shot in history. There's some people enjoying themselves in the normal way, and here's some amateurs enjoying themselves in the abnormal way. This is VK3SKT and VK3VJS.
Okay. We're guilty as play as charged.
Okay. These guys are setting up a software-defined transceiver system and a retivus radio with DMR. A somewhat digital sound to it. On the right, Jeff, 3VJS. Could you give us a quick rundown on what you've got here?
Okay, this module right here is a H-bridge.
Oh, good, thanks, Joe.
And it's capable, if you put a bit over 50 volts on it, you get 200 watts of output, carry.
It's hard for
this
me.
one here is a current mode Class D. And it's not quite as powerful, mainly because it's got 4 fetch, and this one only has 2.
So it's 2 complete transmitters there?
Yeah, two different modules.
As you may hear, we had wind troubles.
Higher load and the is about 13 ohms, this one is 6.
Note for next time, bring a wind guard for the microphone.
Low voltage, high current. Well, this one here is more high voltage, low current. Which is more favourable.
Okay, Peter, give us a bit of a rundown on what's going on here.
Okay, this is a digital modes transceiver for 80 metres, so you can plug it into your laptop and have keyboard chat contacts. It was described in the current issue of Amateur Radio magazine, but only as a receiver, as I hadn't built the transmitter part, but this now has a transmitter part.
3 different adjustable frequencies.
Well, no, they are all one frequency. What I'm using, this is called a Super VXO, because they are just 3.58 megahertz colour burst crystals, but I need to actually get 3.578, so I need to drop them 1500 hertz lower than their marked frequency, which is quite difficult to do on an 80 metre crystal. So the idea is that you've got 3 crystals in parallel, a lot of inductance in series, and that allows you to zero in on 3578, which happens to be the centre frequency of a mode called JS8, which is like FT8, but you can actually have 2A chats with it, keyboard chats on it.
Right.
I don't actually use these.
So
these are,
it's been heard as far away as northern New South Wales.
I wanted to test these.
I haven't had a 2A contact on it, but people have picked up my signal, and I have received stations on it from around Australia.
To see what these speeds were going.
So that's Peter Parker's digital simple transmitter. Paddy board construction. Peter Godfrey talking to Adam and Jeff VK3VJS. This is a dipole somebody put up, I think, for 40 metres. There's Dan Murter on the left. And the 40 metre dipole is fed by a balun, which is extremely light. You'll see it in a moment. That's one end of it on a squid pole. And there's the balun hanging in the middle of the dipole. Quite a few amateurs were present, something like 20 at one stage, I think. I didn't know the names of all of them, unfortunately. This chap was getting his software-defined transceiver going. You can see the screen of it there on 7074 kilohertz, which I think is the whisper frequency. Tom 3FTOM on the right. And Peter Parker on the left. And they're getting whisper going with a mobile phone. Portable antenna, I think, loaded for 40 metres, unless I'm mistaken. Tom VK3FTOM on the left and Peter Parker on the right. And they're operating off lithium cells, I think. I don't think those are actually lead acid.
I suppose 3 is tolerable, I suppose. No.
I think that's Eddie Cito, I'm not quite sure.
Oh, hang on. There.
Jeff 3VJS in his cap. And I think that's VK3ZZ in the background there. Peter Godfrey in the green t-shirt at the back there, whose call sign always evades me, but he lives down near where Tony 3AML used to live, Elstonwick. Dave VK3ASE on the left with his 160 metre adapted receiver that he found, I believe, on somebody's nature strip, being chucked out for the hard rubbish. An old 1970s broadcast receiver that's easily adapted for 160 metres. And Dave's sticking out something else, and I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but we'll soon find out. Ah, it's a loop antenna. He's going to do some DF. He's going to soup up that radio. In the back there, a couple of guys are putting up a dipole of their own using a portable fiberglass squid pole. I think that's Paul VK3ND putting that up there. The main problem with dipoles in this area is keeping them free of the general public, but usually they're only feeding them with 5 or 10 watts of RF power anyway, so nobody's likely to get electrocuted or burnt. There's the squid pole. The top part, as you notice, is not used because it has not enough strength to resist the pull of the wires on the squid pole. An inverted V dipole in the course of erection. And somebody is using a solar panel there. Dave with his FT817. I think that chap on the right's name was Mark. And this is a 200 amp meter for a 20 volt power supply. Somebody with a mysterious metal package, and we soon found out what it was. A beautifully made, I might add, homemade receiver for 3 amateur bands. I admire the metalwork these guys can do. It's very, very clean. Apologies for the windy sound. There wasn't much I could do with it with the existing mic on my Sony AX53, and there is the receiver with the cover taken off, and as you can see, it's a nice piece of handiwork. A home-built transceiver. Yes, some people still build them, and very effectively.
That's the driver board. That's just no matter what I do, so that's the module.
VK3ZZ in the orange t-shirt. There's Steve 3SL, slightly out of focus.
Some more padding, and into the IF, SA612 product detector. That messy bit there's the AGC.
And saying hello to the people on the stream. Pirate, NPI Test, Terry Sims, of course, 3FTJS, DJ Royzer, g'day. And is there a site where these events are posted? Yes, the VK3YE website, VK3YE.com, or you might like to put it up. I see 3YE is actually with us on the talkback text box. And g'day, Peter. There's Bob Tate doing one of his stories. And there was this guy, and there was me, and there was me in my car, and he tried to assault me. So what did I do? I got under the car, I lifted the car up, like this. Put the car, there we go, there the car goes up. No, it probably wasn't that, but Bob is well known for his recounting of stories. While most people were on the beach catching the rays, we were catching the radio waves. And Peter was doing a little bit of gratuitous advertising on his t-shirt, VK3YE.com, and that's where you'll find the news of these QRP by the Bay gatherings. They also, I believe that there's a Facebook page for QRP by the Bay too. There's Dave's frame antenna, loop antenna. Guy on the right had just designed this portable 2-metre Yagi, which he explained the construction of. It fits together very, very easily, and I'll just turn up the level so you can hear his explanation. I didn't take note of his call sign, unfortunately.
Okay, Dave, and you have the threaded, you can actually screw the threaded element on there.
Yeah, so it's an M5 bolt, which is just bolted through a piece of Perspex with a washer and a piece of copper foil under the head. So that provides the termination point. And the element, quite simply, screws on. I've got a bit of anti-seize compound on it just to make it go on and off smoothly.
And that's your baling at the back there, that coil.
Yeah, and the coil is the balun and combination impedance transformer. So
Okay, so this is for 2 metres?
2 metres, yeah. It's a German design, and the feed impedance of the antenna is actually 28 ohms.
Okay.
So we've got a quarter wave of 275 ohms in parallel, which is around 35 ohms.
Yep.
Which is the, now you might know better than I, the geometric mean of the two impedances. Anyway, something like that.
Okay.
And here's Dan Murter with the latest Texan receiver. Digital with a rotatable loopstick antenna on top. Steve 3SL, Dave 3ASE. Dave looks like he's just come back from one of his hikes. He hadn't been near a razor for a few days. And hello to Dave if you're listening. Again, if you want...
It looks like
Here we
a
are.
variation of the Pixie, but possibly a little bit better. But I think it's the same basic design. 2219. That they put out about 1 watt or so that's quite a good transistor. Okay, so low pass filter. I suspect the detection, it would have direct conversion receiver. I suspect the detection is through the junction of that, like those little $5 PC transceivers. So it won't be the greatest of receivers because I can't see any separate detection thing. But yeah, I'm not sure what. Oh, died. That might change the pitch of the side. Yeah, so yeah, it's a nifty little. It's probably a bit more power than the Pixie, I think.
And here's one of Dave's Nature Strip special receivers. More gratuitous advertising. Shame on you, Peter. And as the sun sets slowly into the Werribee Sewage Farm on the other side of the bay, we say goodbye to beautiful downtown Chelsea, and with many happy memories and looking forward to the next QRP by the Bay. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima with the regular Saturday night test transmission and video streaming. If you want to see the video stream, I suggest you Google VK3AML 30 October 2021. That is, Google the phrase VK3AML 30 October 2021 and you should be seeing our stream. And thank you very much for the invitation to that show about 18 months ago, Peter Parker. That was the February 2020 QRP by the Bay, the last of the QRP by the Bays before the big lockdown. Little did we know what the next few months would bring. I don't think we're likely to see a gathering like that without face masks and 1.5 metre spacings, or maybe I'm a little bit pessimistic. But with regard to amateur gatherings, repeating that announcement of earlier on, Gels Road, Wheelers Hill, Columbia Park, 10 a.m. on Cup Day, Tuesday the 2nd of November, this coming Tuesday. There's a gathering, an informal gathering of hams organised by VK3FTOM, Tom. I'll be there with 2-metre transmitter and some digital slow scan equipment whereby I'll be able to transmit pictures of the gathered throng. And that should put people off, shouldn't it? But if you should not be able to come along and have 2-metre facilities, a computer and the necessary freeware, the EasyPal digital slow scan freeware, you'll be able to look in on the Gels Road gathering on 2 metres. The frequencies yet to be announced will probably be on the normal 146.5 initially, QSYing to some simplex frequency. This is VK3AML with a regular Saturday night test. And now if I can bring up the necessary item. A coverage that was shot by VK7MJ, Mike Groth and myself, of the far south of New Zealand. This is as far south as you can go in Australasia without running out of land, exclusive of Stewart Island, which we've also been to. But basically this was a trip that started at Dunedin, went down through the south coast, the picturesque south coast of the South Island of New Zealand, which very few Australians, for some strange reason, ever visit, perhaps because it's so cool and windy. But we had an exceptionally good week for this. There was virtually a heat wave in Invercargill. It hit, I think, 22 degrees one of the days. And Invercargill is at almost 47 degrees south. We're at 38 degrees south, so there's quite a bit of difference in latitude between us and them. They're effectively several hundred kilometres south of Hobart. But exploring that coast was a delight. We came across several seal colonies, as you will see. There are also the biggest automotive museums anywhere in Australasia, in, of all places, Invercargill. So you'll see a bit of that too. And hello to the guys in Invercargill. I know Rory Hannon looks in occasionally, along with Mike and Rachel Bailey. Mike is the secretary of the Awarua Radio Museum, a little bit south of Invercargill, an exceptional radio museum. And his wife Rachel is one of the conveners, one of the producers at the local community radio station, Southland Radio, of which more later. So with our journey through the Catlins, Nugget Point, Owaka, Invercargill and Fortrose, not to mention at the end of the trip the Bluff, New Zealand's southernmost port, let's go over to the video coverage from 2019. New Zealand's far south, Owaka, Nugget Point, Catlins, Invercargill and Bluff with Chris Long, VK3AML and Mike, VK7MJ. Look at the right there, you'll see that the red line indicates our first trip from Dunedin to Nugget Point, so that this coverage opens the road to Nugget Point. And there's the Pacific Ocean out to the east. We skirt the coast for a few kilometres until finally you find this prominence, this peninsula that goes out into the Pacific quite a distance, Nugget Point, with its lighthouse up on top of the ridge there. So we made our way out. This was a deviation from the main road, but well worth the trip. Quite a few weekend shacks there. Nugget Point is an important seal colony. It also has several breeding colonies of seabirds. A gannet is one, spoonbill another, penguins also. There's Mike at the car park coming up to join us for the 600-metre walk to the Nugget Point Light, which is an experience in itself, high above the waters of the Pacific, with a good view down to the rocks below where seals frequently gather. Not for those with vertigo, as you might notice. There's the gannet colony, at least I think these are the gannets. It was a bit difficult to tell at this time. No, they're spoonbills, sorry. I just had a close look at that. Looking back north. Nugget Point Lighthouse. And we're about to walk along that track on that knife-edge ridge. Could be bad in a windy day, but it was particularly good this day. This is the easternmost point of the south coast of New Zealand, so it kind of divides the Southern Ocean from the Pacific. The fur seal colony. For a while I was wondering what Mike was filming from his position on the edge there, but then I looked down and put my camera on maximum zoom, and what do we see? A whole group of seal pups, maybe a dozen of them, frolicking about, literally playing like little puppies in the shallows, while Mama Deer sits on the rock scratching herself beside and keeping a weather eye over the kids. A good 6 or 7 of them there, and there were a few others all scattered about, one down the bottom there, a big bull. These are New Zealand fur seals, a little bit different to ours. They have very prominent ears that you might catch sight of occasionally. Sorry I couldn't go in any closer than this, but this was on absolute maximum zoom. There's a male and a female playing in a pond down there. These are sufficiently shallow that they would have been safe from sharks. Another couple, a pup and a father. Mike trying to hold the camera steady. And I'm panning around looking for them. There they are, leaping up the rocks. The behaviour is very like little dogs, you know. They probably have an equivalent intelligence level. Play seems to be an important part of their learning process. And keeping in safe spots that are rock pools of this type, free of sharks, is another. The view towards the tip of Nugget Point, and there's an archway rock. Very much volcanic rock, basaltic. The beaches here aren't yellow sand, they're usually grey or brown, as you can see down below. That side has the penguin colony, but we weren't there at a time of the day where the penguins were in. The light on Nugget Point, and looking out to the east, off Nugget Point. I wouldn't dare to venture down there, it looks too unstable. quite a few tourists that day too. I think it was a Friday evening.
Guess who? You mightn't recognise the beanie, but it's a special Dunedin only, one of a kind, to keep a certain head warm and brain from freezing.
The view back towards Dunedin. And that is Mount Cargill at Dunedin, which is a good 100 kilometres away. It was a very clear day, exceptionally clear. Looking back towards Nugget Point. Okay, let's move on. The next phase of the trip took us to the capital of the Catlins, that area at the south of New Zealand, Owaka. Entering Owaka. Quite a large town, and the place where we had lunch. Want to stretch your legs?
Well, yeah, might as well.
You won't be able to for a fair while after this.
Okay, well, there must be things to see.
The Black Sheep Boutique.
Oh, gosh. A cafe and restaurant, accommodation, no vacancy. That's all right, I'm not vacant.
Peak season, February.
Catlins area school, the supermarket. Actually, might go into this.
That's the cafe in front of us where we had lunch, and we went to the local museum.
Right here. And Balclutha, Clinton. Okay. What's this? Looks like a cafe.
This is south of Balclutha.
Hello.
Catlins Soap Company. Oh, motorcycles. There's Mike and myself heading off for lunch. And then we found that there was a community museum for the Catlins area. So we took a tour with the permission of the people who had the place. It was a small entry fee, but I was allowed, with their blessing, to take a bit of video of all of this. Examples of volcanic scoria from this part of New Zealand. Fortunately, this is not as active in geology as perhaps Christchurch is. Histories of some of the local archaeologists and scientists. Maori adzes of varying age, some of them going back almost 1,000 years. Mower Bones. The mower was a giant extinct sort of emu, ostrich sort of a bird, much bigger than the ostrich, and unfortunately was wiped out by the Maori population for food within about a couple of 100 years of the Maori colonisation of New Zealand. Local historical photographs for anybody who's interested, they can flick through. We found these community museums in most New Zealand towns of any size. They're very much better, it seems to me, on organising their history and social history for the benefit of local residents and visitors than we are in Australia. Perhaps I'm underestimating our own efforts, but this museum seemed to me, for a town the size of Owaka, to be incredibly well set up, with very good documentation and a high standard of display. This is the military section of the museum. A mortar there for King and Country, World War I. Encouraging the local kids to get involved. An early local public phone box when phone calls were a penny, and that's a long time ago. The student scribbling wall. They encourage students to put a bit of creative effort in. Another early phone. Ericsson, I think. And a demonstration blacksmith shop for kids who have never seen such a thing, with lots of original equipment. And some audio-visual support. just wandered from room to room, not knowing quite how to organise this. Local telephone exchange in the days of manual exchanges. There was a similar one in the Flinders Island Museum. Another one at Awarua. And this is the product of a local talented model maker, Len Shaw. Material related to the local railway. This area used to have a railway, but not for a very long time. And the coast was first populated by sealers and whalers. There's an example of scrimshaw on, I think, a whale jawbone. South Otago. This is not yet in Southland. I think Owaka was in Otago. You go over the border to Southland shortly west of this town. Some very nice model boats. And a lot of information on local steamers that used to service the area before road or rail. The maritime section of the museum. This is VK3AML with the test transmission, the Saturday night test transmission, and simultaneous YouTube live stream. Dial VK3AML 30 October 2021. That's a whaling tripod with a tripot where they used to boil down the blubber from whales. Tommy Chasland, who was a local pioneer, and Captain Catlin, after which this whole area was named the Catlins. There's Mike with his back to us, reading some of the literature.
Catlins Bay, past Owaka.
And on we go, travelling across the south coast of the South Island of New Zealand. Very beautiful country, not unlike...
We're looking approximately west,
Gippsland.
and we're on the extreme south coast of New Zealand.
With cars
There are
going by.
farms down below.
Quite a few farms in this area. It's fairly lush and productive country.
Tapatoe.
Papatoa.
Go back over the bridge. Wyndham. I thought that was up the...
And at this stage we're going for the Florence Lookout near Tatuku Beach, which you'll see down there. That's looking
East from Florence Hill Lookout.
looking east. Very good beaches here, but by golly, it's cold water. In fact, these are probably the best beaches I saw in any part of New Zealand. Broad, yellow sand, lovely surf coming in, not too deep, good place to swim. And this is Tatuku Bay. The Florence Hill Lookout. Tatuku Beach with the distant peninsula. The peninsula has quite a few holiday shacks on it, as you'll see in a moment. What a beach. The beach must be 1 kilometre wide. A distant shot of some holiday makers down on the beach. And there are some guys in there swimming, but I think they've got their wetsuits on. I wouldn't be game to go in there with normal bathers. Tatuku Peninsula, and there are the holiday houses out in a very exposed part of the coast. That would really intercept the westerlies in winter. Very pretty part of the coast anyway. and pretty far south. They'd be a good a good HF location for hams. Moving on, we now go across to Fort Rose, which is on a river estuary coming out to a beach on the south coast. But here we got our first view of Bluff Hill at the southern end of New Zealand. Stewart Island on the left, our first view of it, and the highest mountain on Stewart Island, Mount Anglem, 980 metres.
Of the coast down towards Invercargill, and notice the colour of the paddocks here is a bright green even at this February time of the year. Really extraordinarily green.
There's the dead centre of town.
Past the cemetery.
We're actually in Fort Rose.
And we're just entering Fort Rose.
Entering Fort Rose, where we had lunch.
Coast of New Zealand.
750 metres.
And there's Mike going in. I think this was afternoon tea. So we indulged a bit. I got myself a lovely buttered savoury scone from memory. There we are. Then out on the back veranda for a look at the surroundings and the river estuary. Quite a few motorcyclists were coming down here. There was a thing called the Burt Munro Rally going on in Invercargill. Burt Munro was, of course, the guy who was famous for being the world's fastest Indian. He even had a film made about him by Hollywood. The beach at Fort Rose, and somebody playing the goat on a jet ski. Boy, there'd be a bad rip there. Looks like a father and son outfit, actually. Son's on his lap, I think. Doing quite a clip. The final trip into Invercargill. Invercargill, our motel was in that circle on the right. I must say Invercargill was the biggest surprise of our entire New Zealand tour. We'd always been told it was a dump, it's flat, the weather's awful, don't go there. What we found instead was a surprisingly cultural town, which is going through a revival owing to improvements in their equivalent of our TAFE system. The technical colleges there are very strong, just as universities are strong in Dunedin. So this is the final little leg into where we had our motel. Colonial on Tay. That's it on the left.
Right, 3:35. Where's the reception?
There's the reception.
Here it is.
And this is our motel, Colonial on Tay. We use this as a base to explore Stewart Island and Bluff and all the surrounds.
I'm in Invercargill. It's, what is it now? 8:21 a.m. on...
This is a message from my wife Prue that I wanted to send via internet because she had hidden in my luggage a St. Valentine's Day card for me to find on St. Valentine's Day, which was this day, the 14th of February 2019.
To the love of my life. And I think Mike over there is cringing while he listens to this. Somewhere in New Zealand. Well, I'm actually in Invercargill, about as far south as you can go without leaving the coast. I think you can go to Bluff as well. So here we're undoing the envelope. And we see side by side with a couple of little bears, please note. And it says, by this stage I am missing you heaps, you're predicting, and only 2 more sleeps. To my darling boy, happy Valentine's Day, love, your very own Prudy XX. Well, Prudy XX to you too. And I'll be seeing you within about 4 or 5 days, so I hope you've had not too lonely a time over there, and I hope that the videos that we shoot will be making up for whatever lost time we've got. All the best, my love.
And opposite this motel was a Baptist church with that little fence on the right. At night, I would hide behind that fence with a piece of HF wire antenna and a little receiver so that the local bother boys wouldn't find this guy doing suspicious things. Rainbow over Invercargill. The local parks there really were something. I was very impressed by the number of parks that had these big windbreak trees, which certainly are required for the prevailing westerlies. The very colourful town hall for Invercargill. One of the local churches, Presbyterian, I think. And this is the city. A surprisingly large city, not because Invercargill is so big. There's the railway station. But Saturday night in Invercargill, and it's a very much more cosmopolitan place than I thought it'd be. Lots of large buildings.
Reminds me of Launceston, actually.
Yeah. Obviously a fairly important industrial centre. Those streets of Invercargill. Those buildings on the left were in the process of being demolished, actually. Whole block was demolished to re-erect in a non-earthquake sensitive way. A long time ago we had empires run by emperors, then we had kingdoms run by kings, now we have countries, hyphen, hyphen, hyphen. My therapist told me the way to achieve inner peace is to finish what I start. So far, I've finished 2 tons of M&Ms and a chocolate cake. I feel so much better already. Slogan signs. This is just opposite where the local community radio station is, in the Hallensteins building. Right there. Southland Radio on FM. Australasia's southernmost community radio station. And that's the entrance to it. We were enthusiastic to get in and have a look or talk to the people there because both of us have had experience of community radio. Sadly, we couldn't arrange things in time. There just wasn't enough lead time. Mike filming Tay Street, and that is the Boer War Memorial, 120 years after its erection. Invercargill really was a surprise. It's off most of the tourist maps. Tourists from Australia, I know, rarely go there, but it's well worth the visit. Good shopping. Surprisingly good shopping considering this is in effectively New Zealand's outback, including several air-conditioned arcades of this type. Further up, I think it was Tay Street, it's a well-known Invercargill monument, that water tower. We found Hayes Hardware store. Sounds not so interesting, but Hayes Hardware store has a big secret. Jesus, yeah, nah. There's a sign with a bit of local pull. And it was getting on and getting difficult to film. So we went to Hayes Hardware store, which you see on the left, the little circles that are on that vertical street on the left. Hayes store. This is about 8 p.m. And we noticed this intriguing sign saying that they had the world's fastest Indian collection. What we didn't know was that the Burt Munro collection of everything related to the world's fastest Indian, plus one of the biggest collections of automotive and related material in New Zealand, is on display free in this store with the idea of attracting more patrons. Burt Munro is well celebrated in Invercargill. There is a yearly motorcycle rally in his honour. Doesn't attract the antisocial types. This is the late Burt Munro, and that's the world's fastest Indian on the Bodyville Salt Flats, breaking a world land speed record. The motorcycle still exists, and it's in Hayes hardware store in Invercargill, as you'll see. They sell all sorts of stuff. I thought of buying those cushions, but I thought Prue might object. Looking through the window, we saw this incredibly old car, and I wondered what the story was, and the next day we revisited and found out. It's a 1910 number 8 Buick, about as far back with that brand as you can go. This is the before picture, before restoration, when cars were incredibly simple. No speedo, no fuel gauge, couple of pedals, a horn that you sound by pushing a bulb, acetylene headlights, not electric, please note. Well, I think they may be actually carbide headlights, and of course crank commencer. The collection inside the shop mixes retail goods with historic displays, a very interesting idea which I've never seen pursued in Australia. So Mike there and I pulled out our cameras and recorded a lot of it. A 1929 Indian 101 Scout motorcycle, possibly from the Burt Munro collection. That iron seat would have been a bit hard on the boom. A 1918 Indian 2-cylinder. A 1923 Harley, before they became overpowered and overweight. In those days, Harleys were light, and not all that overpowered either. Very different to the design concept of the modern Harley-Davidson. There's a close-up of the engine for you. An Indian with one of Hayes' old delivery vans. And they had other things on display. This stationary engine, this donkey engine I should say, was on show. A 1922 Ricardo motorcycle. Somebody's very old tricycle. These are lathes. Some of them are treadle lathes, very ancient. And this was built as a joke. Fuel tank pressure cooker, float bowl is preserving jar, and carburetor is a 1/2-inch brass garden tap. There's a pressure cooker thrown in there, and I think a urinal. I'm not quite sure what this does. I know it moves when they get it going, but there's a warning sign there, warning would-be industrial spies that this is covered by a patent. But nobody knows why. This is not a Briggs & Stratton. This is a steam engine driving a generator off a boat. And the generator was made by an interesting company with local contacts, A.G. Healing of Melbourne. This is a bicycle with a motor wheel, an add-on to a bike that you could do back in the 1920s, I'd guess, that would turn it into a moped. You'd drop the extra wheel on the ground and this would push you along with a tiny motor. The motor wheel moped. Hudson motorbike from 1911, pre-First War, with carbide lamp. Single cylinder, I think. Would have had trouble going up hills, and notice it's driven by a toothed rubber belt around a big pulley on the back wheel. An extra pair of pedals. If you didn't have enough power, you could push it with your feet. A GM Speedway bike, built light. And for sheer wanky overpowered, this takes the cake. A 1965 Chevrolet Corvair motorcycle. Look at the size of the engine. I know cars that have smaller engines than that. This is VK3AML with a regular Saturday night test transmission and a concurrent video coverage via a YouTube live stream. If you want to find that stream, Google VK3AML 30 October 2021. That's VK3AML 30 October 2021. And here is the world's fastest Indian. This is actually a model, but the original is nearby. Burt Munro would lie prone in that. I think he got it up unofficially to 200 miles per hour on one occasion. It would have been frightening. A replica made for the movie in 2005, The World's Fastest Indian. And some of Burt Munro's own materials from various incarnations of the bike that he put together. And here is the original World's Fastest Indian without its streamline cover. That's it. All sorts of modifications done to it. Bored out to 1000cc, so it's extra powerful. Reputed to have done 322 kilometres an hour on one occasion with the streamline covering around it. There's Burt Munro's vehicle registration for 1969. You never know what you'll see there. And his other bike was a Velocette. That one. Burt Munro is remembered in Invercargill for all sorts of reasons. Local innovator. You live more in 5 minutes flat out on a bike like this than most people do in a lifetime, and he's commemorated in sculpture at Queen's Park in Invercargill. There was another, even bigger motorcycle museum called Motorcycle Mecca, where those circles are at the left there. An enormous building with multiple display halls and literally hundreds of motorcycles, the earliest being 1902, as you will shortly see. A 1911 Bradbury Standard in the front window, and at the back of it, a 1911 Royal Enfield. Very small motor. Would have had a bit of difficulty going up hills, I guess. Now this is one of about 5 display halls, and look at all of this. They also had 3-wheeled vehicles, Morgans, even powered invalid chairs. That's another Morgan there in front there, the yellow one. Morgan was a 3-wheeled British car and had particular favour in the 20s and early 30s because lack of a fourth wheel made it, in British terms, licensable as a motorcycle rather than a car, so that you paid lower registration for owning a Morgan. They were very light, sporty, 1 wheel at the back, driven, 2 wheels at the front. And a JAP motorcycle engine. This is intriguing. A 1905 Invicta 4 car, and it really gives you the idea that at this stage people didn't know how automobiles were going to end up. All sorts of different innovative designs were tried, and I'm particularly interested to see the earliest cars, to see the ideas that they had, which later lapsed, maybe not because they were poor ideas, but simply that this required total innovation to go from nothing to a working automobile, a 3-wheeled one in this case. At the other end of the date range, 1960 Messerschmitt, a mini car, 200 cc's, tiny, 3 wheels, Messerschmitt. Another one of the display halls. Number of motorcycles just takes your breath away. I have seen nothing like the size of this collection anywhere in Australia. There's Mike doing a bit of a rev. Only a model, unfortunately. Another hall. It was so overwhelming in scale, it was hard to know where to start with a video coverage except to give an overall coverage like this. Motor scooters. The Vespa. A collection of motor scooters. Very difficult to balance these. The wheels didn't have that gyroscopic effect that larger motorcycles did. So these could be a bit of a death trap. Very small too. You're very exposed. One particularly interesting design, the American Moto Scoot of about 1960. And a local version, the Mighty Atom from 1921, locally designed in New Zealand. 1915 Harley, again, not the massive things that they became later after the Second World War. 1928 Harley, very lightly built. This is one of the oldest motorcycles in the collection, the Motor Scotch. More a moped than anything else. Swiss design. There's the tiny motor on it. 1902 Peugeot is a bit more like a conventional motorcycle, except the leather belt to the back wheel. You can see the design evolving into what we now know as a motorcycle. That would have had trouble getting up hills, I should imagine. 1907 Indian, one of the earliest Indians, the Camelback it's called because of the position of that fuel tank. 1908 Indian is 2-cylinder, the earlier one was 1-cylinder. 113 years old. 1911 Indian, and you can see the evolution of the design. 1913 Indian. Not yet anything like the world's fastest. And a 1914 Indian. 7 horsepower. By 1915 it was starting to look like a reasonably powered job. You can see the kickstarter there at the bottom. The speedo there. This, by the way, is coverage of Motorcycle Mecca in Invercargill. Another gallery. More of them. Where do you start? Royal Enfield 1914, New Hudson 1915. A Motor Guzzi, some more unusual brands now. Triumph, British. Velocette. And the NUT. Why on earth it was called that in 1920, I don't know. Douglas. Now, there's a story here. That Douglas clutch plate there, that flywheel, was used by John Logie Baird as a means of strengthening his scanning discs in the earliest days of television. Not many people know that. Mechanical parts grabbed from other industries to support the birth of television. Another motorcycle hall. This is all at Motorcycle Mecca. Now, a visit to Queen's Park. We were hoping to see the Invercargill Museum, but the building had been closed. It was declared earthquake proof, and unfortunately the whole collection is now stored off-site. We couldn't get access.
The Antarctic Garden.
This is the Antarctic garden of plants that have been transplanted from New Zealand subantarctic islands, Auckland Island, Campbell Island, wilting a bit in the heat of this 20-degree day, which is totally unlike most of Invercargill, but a really beautiful rose garden, a parterre rose garden, and walking through it on a day like this really was something. Queen's Park, Invercargill, very close to the museum. This is VK3AML testing on 147.475 with a regular Saturday night program. We'll be opening up for callbacks, I suppose, about 11 o'clock. But at the moment we're covering aspects of the far south of New Zealand and the areas of Invercargill and Bluff that very few Australian tourists seem to make it to. It's not on the regular tourist runs, and I'm damned if I can see why, because it is a truly beautiful place. Queen's Park in particular. It's right behind what used to be the Southland Museum. The museum's built like a pyramid. Unfortunately, it was not earthquake-proof, so all of the workers are in that prefab building on the left there, managing a collection that's held off-site. This is as close to it as we got to going inside, just peering through the door. God, how frustrating. But we did have access to the Tuatara out the back, which I'll say a bit more about in a minute. Southland Museum also has an observatory, an astronomical observatory attached to it. There it is. And the staff have decamped into those prefabricated buildings for the moment. At the back, though, you can still go and see the Tuatara. What's a Tuatara? It's not a lizard. It's a reptile on a completely separate evolutionary train to most other reptiles and amphibians. The Tuatara was the sole surviving member, only occurs in New Zealand, the sole surviving member of a family of related to dinosaurs that was at its peak before the Jurassic period, so they're an incredibly ancient species. They don't move much. This one was eyeing us off. You can see those funny little slit eyes looking back and forth at us. This fellow is 110 years old, and he's still having babies. If anybody ever offers me a Tuatara gland as a transplant, I might actually take him up on it. Though I wouldn't like to have a face like that, not that mine's much more attractive, but anyway. Tuatara, a unique New Zealand creature. They've even built a sculpture to him in the front of the museum. You can see the relationship to dinosaurs there. Only a little small thing, about 18 inches long, but still. And this was an exceptional day in Invercargill. Local water tower. It's a local icon. Moving now, there's another largest of the automotive museums, Bill Richardson's Transport World, out of town a little bit. This is really unbelievably enormous, and their strong suit, their strong point, is the collection of commercial vehicles, trucks, utilities, everything related to automotive industry, but particularly concentrating on commercial vehicles. They also have almost a complete set of pre-Model T Ford cars, starting with the Model B or C, I think. The Model C. So the Ford Model T obviously wasn't the first. This is the Model C from 1904, one of the earliest retailed Ford cars, in a beautiful state of restoration, as you might notice. All of these cars in Bill Richardson's transport world have been wonderfully restored. I must say I was filled with admiration for the people who've done the work on this. They are probably in better nick now than they were when they left the factory floor. Factory such as it was in days when Fords were making cars in 2s and 3s. Henry Ford's accent was always on light vehicles that were flexible and could take account of very poor roads that were around at that time. There's the Model F. 1905, the next step in the Ford evolutionary line. Moving on, the Ford Model N, 1906, with a hansom cab type top. 1906 Ford Runabout. And the Model R, now with the Ford logo on the front. Self-commencer. And that's from 1907. There's quite a display on Henry Ford. He was a conundrum, a very strange man, very solitary. He was tremendously anti-Semitic. He was forced actually in the 1920s to apologise for his stance on anti-Semitism because he would not hire anybody Jewish in his firm, and ruled like a tyrant over Detroit, the base of the Ford empire. But with age he moderated his views, or was forced to moderate. By about 1928 he actually published an apology for his earlier statements on anti-Semitism.
One of the keys to that flexibility was the front axle.
This is a particularly excellent display on the life of Henry Ford. He was a friend of Thomas Edison, Luther Burbank, and Harvey Firestone, the tyre king. They used to go camping together, that lot. There's the Ford Quadricycle of 1896, the start of his efforts in internal combustion engine cars. So this is the kind of the Ford section of the hall here. I found it very difficult to get a view of each of these unless I walked around the devices. This is in the truck section, a 1915 auto car truck. I hope Jeff VK3VJS is watching this. I think you'll find this very interesting. Solid rubber tyres. Would have been a very bumpy ride. Carriage type springs, no hydraulics, and all the brakes controlled by levers. Carbide lamps for night use, 3 of them. And not much in the way of dashboard indicators. In fact, absolutely nothing. Solid rubber tyres front and back. Again, beautifully restored, not a fingerprint, not a crack of dust anywhere. And next to it, an illustration of the latest Volvo motor to give something of a sense of evolution. 6-phase synchronous permanent magnet outer rotor electric motor. Thornycroft truck. Some of the more exotic brands, the Rio Speedwagon, 1925. How many trucks are there in this museum? I think over 150. It is an unbelievable aggregation. Oh, it's a Singer. I wonder if you can sew stuff on it at the same time you're driving it. Not only can it deliver clothes, you can sew them. I'm being cynical. But all of them gleaming clean. The more modern trucks, of course, they have a very large collection. I'm not sure what the story is on these as to why so many of them have been taken out of circulation for this collection. And I presume, looking at the standard of them just externally, that they can all run, or most of them can. An old school bus. A three-wheeled truck from Dunedin. Most of them have retained their original livery as well as their original attachments. I remember wondering how that worked. Presumably you could catch a tray on that. Something from Tarawera. A comma. 1934 comma Centaur. Truck. A few friends of mine who've been involved with film productions through the years have always pointed out to me that while you do a period drama, cars are reasonably easy for any period to get your hands on a suitable car, even if it's 1920s. But where it comes to commercial vehicles, they're a bit rarer, particularly from the early period. And these cover the whole gamut from 1910, let's say, right up to the present. Here's a nice one from, I think, 1930 or thereabouts. And sectioned engines to show you how they work. An Austin engine, used as a teaching aid. Sectioned. A number of those section motors used to be in the Museum of Victoria. I don't think they've been put on display for recent years. Test benches from garages. A Bosch fuel pump test bench. I'll just check that my stream is going okay. Yep, looks like we're streaming fine. And there are about 15 people watching, so that's not too bad. A tractor section with advertising materials and sundry stuff from agricultural work. Now, local petrol pumps through the ages. Hand-pumped petrol pumps are now a thing of the past. And that's a fuel carrier, a Texaco, I think, from the 1940s. A petrol tanker, 1940s style. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima streaming views of Richardson's transport world from Invercargill, one of the largest collections of commercial vehicles anywhere in Australasia. They have a little cinema attached to this transport museum where presumably they show films relating to transport. The concentration is on commercial vehicle history, but there is a little of everything for everyone here, everyone that's into history particularly. Stills from the world's fastest Indian on that opposite wall. It was a real maze with stuff to see in every direction. So many trucks, I cannot even begin to describe the collection. The early ones particularly attracted my attention because you see them so seldom. And just as with cars you see in the early ones, 1912 Pierce Arrow for example, interesting ways of design of these things. some aspects of which have disappeared because they had better ways of doing things, and other interesting design ideas lapsed simply because people didn't continue with them. So it's almost a history of ideas that you see here. Notice the fuel gauge on the left. It's a simple glass tube where you see the level of the fuel. Carbide headlight. No electric headlights at that stage. And the Pierce Arrow trademark. 1912, a very early truck. That's an International. Another International. Sterling. These are all back about First War period. White. I think they made steam cars too. A GB, whatever that was. An American called a Wachusett. There's some very odd brands that are probably impossible to get spare parts for now. You'd have to make them on a lathe. A 1923 GMC. It eventually became just a little bit too much to absorb, and so I wandered around these galleries just drinking in the sheer number of different makes and models and periods and designs, and just marvelling that they were all in such excellent condition. A very early Mack truck, 1932. There are some modern trucks that are in appalling condition that are only 5 years old that I could cite, but these have been meticulously restored. That's a very early Mack there. Solid rubber tyres, please note. And chain drive at the back. 1918 Mack truck. From Richardson's Transport World in Invercargill. This is VK3AML testing. It's now 10:51. In about 15 minutes we'll be opening for a chat, hopefully, on 147.475. I'll just check my stream. Seems that the stream health is still quite good. I hope everybody's getting a good stream out of this. I've upped the transfer rate to 7.5 megs per second this week in order to get it closer to the optimum for 1280p? 1020p, I should say. Messages from Jeff Sylvester, and Peter Parker has been watching. Some petrol Bowsers of early design, and after this haul, I think we moved on.
Mack adopted the Bulldog as their symbol.
Right.
Because of that.
Oh, I see. That's where the British Bulldog thing comes from.
Yeah.
Looking down on one of the larger exhibition halls, but there were about 4 of these exhibition halls. How far can you take a historical collection? The answer is this. Even down to a model of an 1860s railway, a working steam model. And this is the stuff that has yet to be restored. I often wonder where old trucks go to die, and I think I know now. They all go to the end of New Zealand at Invercargill. The last shot of Richardson's Transport World before we move on. And so we headed off south of Invercargill to Bluff, about 30 kilometres south. It's Invercargill's port. And Bluff Hill.
Mountains just to the right of the road, Mount Anglem, which is the highest mountain on Stewart Island. And this is supposed to be a sunny day in Invercargill. So much for sun. Not this sunny. Just. Welcome to 47 degrees south.
And there is the town of Bluff, looking across the estuary. And Bluff Hill on the right, it's the only high point within Kui, very flat land around. The TY Point aluminium smelter on the other side. The Green Hills wind farm, they've got quite a few wind farms here. No shortage of that as a resource. But as you move into Bluff, you realise it's a highly industrialised area. It all has, it feels a little like an abandoned whaling station. It has that slightly rusty look to it. I know that
Walkway photo. Okay. Bluff, where
the drive into Bluff. I know that a couple of friends of mine, Mike and Rachel Bailey, have recently bought a block of land here. They call it a section, S-I-C-T-I-O-N, and are intending to build a dwelling there eventually, in which case Mike, who is ZL4OM, will probably have a very good sea path across to Melbourne. So looking forward to hearing you on 80 metres some night, Mike. Meantime, this is a tour of their hometown of Bluff. These are the northern suburbs of Bluff. A little bit the rougher part, this. Quite a few people come to Bluff to take the ferry across to Stewart Island, which is about 30 kilometres across the other side of the Foveaux Strait. There's the hill, Bluff Hill, on the right where we're headed, to take a look at the whole of the south coast of New Zealand's South Island and Stewart Island beyond. Coming into the commercial centre of Bluff now. And this is the furthest south you can find a major town or a major port in anywhere in Australasia. So it's an important base for freighters for the Invercargill area. It's also an important base for ships going to the Antarctic, about the closest port. The Bluff Oysters are probably the best known culinary delight of this area. I haven't yet sampled them, I must say. It's something I failed to do on my last trip down there. A lot of these are oyster suppliers, these. And now the pub area, the Eagle Hotel, and that orange yellowish building is the local backpackers Bluff Lodge, for those who are interested in exploring the southernmost parts of New Zealand. That's a good place to stay. Now we go up to Bluff Hill.
Recalculating drive 80 meters.
And yes, we were using a GPS. This is the lookout on top of Bluff Hill, the highest point around the southern coast of New Zealand with a decent view. Kind of juts out into the Southern Ocean, and it's always been a centre for communication. There are lots of communication services on VHF up here, as you'll see in a moment. There's one, there's several. Bluff Hill Lookout. spiral path that's protected from the wind. And that's the town of Bluff down below us and the port. Looking north to the Green Hills wind farm, out east towards Oropuki, and that is Stewart Island in the distance. Some of the VHF transmitting facilities. Ours was the red hire car in that car park there. Looking north back towards Invercargill. Other side of the estuary there is TY Point, where they have the aluminium smelter. No longer operating, actually. It's closed since I took these pictures. That's the south coast of New Zealand, looking back towards Owaka. The port, the Green Hills wind farm, TY Point. And Mike trying desperately to keep his camera steady in a gale of a wind, which apparently was only considered to be a gentle breeze locally on this day. The flat area at the south of New Zealand and the mysterious looking mountains of Stewart Island out beyond. You can get a ferry out there. We did. Three of us, Dave 3ASE, myself and Mike Groth, all went across there and had a look round for a few days after taking these videos. So now we go back to the town of Bluff for a look around there. That's the little red circle, the larger of the two red circles at the left. Down from Bluff Hill. A very steep road, and the locals do wheelies, as you could probably see. And this is the sheltered side of Bluff Hill, where most of the residences are. The actual commercial centre of the place looks kind of a little tired. I don't know how to put a finger on it, but you can imagine most of the year they get pretty stiff weather here. An advertisement for the yearly Oyster Festival, which is apparently quite a local deal. We'll go past the previous turn-off this time and have a look at some of the shops. The ferry terminal for Stewart Island is on the left. The local backpackers. One of the local pubs. A wine bar. The anchorage. There'd be a lot of international sailors and seamen that would be calling in there too, I imagine. And a cafe up in front there that I think we stopped at for a bite to eat. So we stopped at that cafe and gallery and had a look at their local folk museum, which you'll see in a moment. Some quite nice houses in this part of Bluff. This is out towards Stirling Point, which is where the road finally finishes. A general view of the commercial centre of Bluff. They say you learn from your mistakes. That's why I'm making as many as possible. Soon I'll be a genius. It's a frank admission from a bank, and this is a local second-hand store, which sadly was closed this day. I wish I could have seen. The local folk museum, which is eccentric, is the best description. An eccentric folk museum with art ideas behind it. And this is their PowerShell room. They call it PowerShell, we call it Mother of Pearl. A 1920s kitchen. And this room was just plain eccentric. So we had a cup of tea before heading on to Stirling Point, where our journey ended. Stirling Point, right down the bottom there. It's as far as the road goes. So we go out via the local war memorial, which is on our left there. A view of the Southern Ocean coming up. Medical centre would be very necessary for some of the industrial accidents that must come out this way with some of the heavy industry that's represented here. And these are the houses at the southern end of the bluff. Again, about as far south as you can go. There is a more southerly part of the New Zealand coast at Slope Point, somewhat to the west of this, but there are no major towns there. Here I was called upon to take photographs of the local tourists. After they saw my camera, they assumed I knew something about photography. And this is the sign at the end of the road, the end of New Zealand. And this is what the sea looks like there, a heaving mass of kelp beds. Masses of kelp. Dog Island out there with its lighthouse. Somebody very game was taking their runabout out on the Foveaux Strait. And that's looking east across the end of Bluff to the end of Fjordland. There is actually a walking path that goes right around Bluff Promontory, and there are a couple of guys walking around it. Bluff Hill on the right.
There we have the case of the Melbourne tourist photographing the Southern Ocean.
And that photograph of me comes to the end of our coverage of the extreme south of New Zealand. So now all that remains to me is to open up for hopefully a discussion on 2 metres on 147.475 through that transmitter, which hopefully is still working after the 90 minutes I've put it through. So he said hopefully raising his level control. This is VK3AML, now calling CQ on 147.475. Do we have any listeners?
VK3 ECG. And VK3 ACZ Portable.
Yes, hello VK3 ECG and VK3 ACZ Portable. I've just switched you through to the stream so that people on the stream can hear you. I'll just check that we've still got stream after all this time. Yeah, there's about 18 people watching on the stream. John Bailey, VK3BLX, and he's watching the museum video on a 65-inch screen, which is... I'd be very interested to know how it's going this week, because with each week since the fixing of our internet stream, we've been running slightly faster bit rates to the point where I'm pushing it a bit. So who else have we got there? Harry Thau, the bikers before the electric bikes were invented, probably. From VK7HXT in Hobart. Hello to you. I know that a few people in Hobart watch, including my very good friend who you saw in that video, Mike Groth VK7MJ, who lives down Margate Way. And VK3YE, Peter, if you're still watching. Great pleasure to be invited to your last QRP by the Bay, and I hope to get to the next one. And I should mention again that there's to be a little informal gathering of hams at Columbia Park, Gels Road, Wheelers Hill, on Cup Day, Tuesday the 2nd of November. That's this coming Tuesday at 10 a.m. And I'll certainly be there with bells on. I'll have my 2-metre transmitter plus a tablet computer that I can connect to the 2-metre transmitter to transmit slow scan. So people's images that we see coming to the gathering will be put out, with their permission, of course, on 2 metres. So we've got VK3 ACZ Peter out portable, and we've got VK3 ECG Dave, who's at his home location at Warrandyte. So we might take Dave first, you having called in first, with a pause, Dave, in case somebody wants to speak. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. I'll just change my headphone connection so I can hear you. Okay, VK3 ECG, VK3AML.
VK3 BJS, Chris, with the news that Bert Newton passed away tonight, age 83.
Good heavens, I wasn't expecting that. Bert Newton, one of the real icons of my youth. So Jeff, yeah, I put you down there. Hope you enjoyed the video, Jeff. A lot of that material on trucking I put together with you in mind, knowing that you have an interest in such things. VK3 ECG to take, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group VK3 ECG. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Jeff. Good evening, Peter. Yeah, great, fantastic video. It's one of the great regrets is that when I was down in Dunedin a few years ago, I only had a car for part of the time I was there, and we'd been further north when we were driving around. When I got back down to Dunedin, I eventually gave up the car, so I never got down to Invercargill, which is one of those shames. But no doubt I shall get back again at some stage. But fantastic video, and the stream was perfect as far as I could see, and I was looking at 180p, and it was really very, very nice. I put on full screen here on the computer, and it was lovely. And obviously the 4K camera is doing a fantastic job with the with all the cars and the bikes. Extraordinary. A couple of things will just caught my sort of memories, if you like. I remember my father, who was born in 1908, my father, and talking about, I think he had an Enfield motorbike when he was about 14 or 15, and that probably would have been quite an old machine even then. I think they started making them around just after 1900, something like that. And but no starter, no. You had to run along with it and just leap on when the motor started. So you had to time it because you had to have a reasonable amount of throttle to get the thing started, he said. And of course, as soon as it did start, it took off because there was no real clutch on it either. And so you just had to leap on and hope you got there. The other thing I remember him telling me was that the carbide lights. Which had that sort of the drip down onto the crystals or whatever, and get to light the gas. And of course, not many people bothered to light it if you could get away with it. And of course, the police would stop you if you weren't displaying lights, and you made the excuse that a flame must have gone out or whatever. And the policeman would, he said, put their hands on the lamp, and if the lamp was warm, you were all right. But if the lamp was stone cold, then you got a ticket. Some interesting things. But I did notice actually, as you were in Bluff on the video, a nice grey Austin A35 going in the other direction, which was my first car, an A35. But there we are. Back to you, Chris, VK3AML and the group VK3 ECG.
Yeah, okay, Dave. So many friends of mine have had Austins. I think 3GG had an Austin back in the 70s, and I remember he had it because he couldn't afford a new battery for it, and frequently the battery would go flat, and it was the last of the Austins that could be crank started. Oh God. Which I saw him do a couple of times without losing a wrist or a hand. So on to Peter, VK3ACZ portable. Where on earth would you be portable at this time of night, Peter? VK3ACZ and group VK3AML.
VK3AML and the group from VK3ACZ handheld portable. Belgrave in the Dandenong Ranges there, base of the Dandenong Ranges. I intended to watch the whole broadcast. I intended to be back home from playing portable HF radio this afternoon, but unfortunately propagation for the contest was just absolutely amazing. I'm going to have to watch your broadcast on replay And but I have a very good excuse. Tonight on 10 metres, I've been to England, Scotland, Poland, and a few other places in Europe, and that was just on 10 metres. It's been going absolutely gangbusters, and I just couldn't leave it. Been rained on and everything, so I'm soaked right through, and because I only had the equipment to keep my radio gear, keep the rain away from the radio gear. But anyway, it sounds like I've missed another terrific broadcast. Don't worry, I will catch up with it. I'm just about to pack up my portable location here, bring the squid pole down and the long wire and all that stuff. Thought I'd come up and at least give you one over. Oh, by the way, club meeting on Monday night. If you're intending to go, I hope you are, because there's a vaccinated-only policy for going along. I can offer you a lift home if that's the case. But anyway, the solar flare a couple of days ago, which was raising concerns, and there was talk about aurora and all the rest of it, and I was worried we'd lose propagation for this weekend, but no, it's been the opposite. It's actually been too good. But anyway, once more, sorry I missed the broadcast. I will catch up later, but VK3AML in the group VK3ACZ. Oh, and good evening there, Dave. You probably can't hear me, but good evening anyway. Over.
Yeah, just before you go off, Peter, where are you? I think I've lost him. No, it looks like he's taking his antenna down or whatever. VK3ACZ and group, lovely that you've been managing to call in, and I'll take a note of the club meeting. I'll look for the Sherbrooke group, although it might be a bit difficult as I'm planning the Gels Road Columbia Park thing the following day and getting all the gear ready for it. It's going to be pushing it to get out to the meeting on Monday night. I'll see how I go. I do want to spend some time with my wife. As you might have noticed from the Valentine's Day card that she sent me to be found among my goodies in Invercargill, we do have a good relationship, and I want to keep it that way. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll hand it now through to Jeff, VK3VJS. It was very much with you in mind, Jeff, that I threw together all the material on the history of the trucks in that Bill Richardson's transport world. Some of the trucks going back to solid rubber tyre days, and I think one or two of them were actually steam trucks. VK3VJS and group, VK3AML.
Well, I'm not that old, Chris. Steam and solid tyres. Oh, crikey. I'm not that old. I missed that bit, Chris, because I'm watching most of it with great pleasure. Terrific quality. And your commentary was good. I think I had to bail out the museum with the motorbikes, those acres, well, what appeared to be acres and acres of motorbikes. I had to go and have a shower. I hadn't had one for 2 nights. I was up last night looking at Django Unchained, which featured a short clip at the end of, even though it was a spaghetti western made by whatever his name, Tarantino, John Jarrett, but he got his just desserts, a 45 slug through the through the chest or whatever, but it was John Jarrett for sure, and the Aussie accent was certainly out of place. You're talking about acetylene lights. I have one here. It's a Chinese or Japanese replica with a 4-inch reflector, and the last time I fired it up, it burst into flames. The seal wasn't too good, and the acetylene gas started to leak out of it, and it just burst into flames. But I rescued it, and I'm not going to put any more acetylene in it, Chris. So there you are. But it's a great little gadget, and it emitted a beautiful light, if I remember rightly. Now, Bert Newton, of course, he's one of the... Bert Newton would
have claim, I think, to be one of the longest employed people in show business. Starting out as with 3DB, I think it was, picking records out of the library, then an on-air announcer, and then on television, and then he was on stage shows, and then he was in films. And I always reckon that he was one of the world's longest-serving entertainers. So he'll certainly be missed. And we all know his wife, Patty. She Swallows Juniors and all that sort of thing. She's great. Well, she's still great. She's still lively and whatever. And of course, the black sheep of the family, who won't be mentioned. I hope he's gone, taken a proper course in life over there in America. So there you are. And what else was there? I can't. I've got to put up with these idiots now racing around the road. I don't know. You let them off the leash and these idiots go crazy. And good evening there to Dave. And Peter was mobile and he said he was up at Belgrave working HF all day. So it sounds like he's mobile and he dropped in and out, but I did hear him say Belgrave. So there you are, Chris. Look, I won't hold it. I'm not going to have another late night like last night. It was 1 o'clock before Django finished. And it sort of upset me a bit today. I was a little bit behind in everything. So keep up the good work. Oh, I've left a little message on the thing there that I hope to get up to Columbia Park on Cup Day, but it also is my birthday. Unless something crops up from Mount Eliza, I'll certainly try and get there, Chris. I haven't been to one of those turns, but I'll certainly make an effort, providing nothing else comes up. VK3AML in the group. Thank you again, Chris. VK3BJS.
VK3BLX on the side.
And VK3BLX. And I see, John, that you were viewing on a 65-inch screen. I'd be very interested to know what you were seeing, because with each week since the repair of the internet cable between the modem and the street, which was defective, and the replacement of the modem by Optus, which was done free of charge, I've been pushing up the video transfer rate and therefore the quality. And at the moment I'm doing, 7.5 megabytes per second, which is higher by a factor of 3 than I started with 3 weeks ago. So, yeah, well, happy birthday, Jeff, for Tuesday. We'll have to get a little cake along or something to that gathering at Wheelers Hill in that case. So it'll be nice to see you on Tuesday if you do manage to get there. And just repeating the comment that VK3FTOM, young Tom, has organised a little informal get-together of hams at Columbia Park, Gels Road, Wheelers Hill, for Cup Day starting 10 a.m. So anybody who's interested, it's as far as I know, it's the first ham confabulation that has happened under any circumstance since the lockdown. That will be with the exception of the Sherbrooke Radio Club, who I believe is meeting the previous night. So I will hand it around to VK3BLX, John. I don't think I've spoken to you before on the air, but very nice to have you on board, particularly with the video stream and all. And for some strange reason, my face is coming out as if I'm blushing at the moment, but I think that I'm going to have to get stuck into the saturation controls in the video streaming. VK3BLX. I hope I don't look like that. It looks like I'm going to have a heart attack. VK3BLX in the group. VK3AML.
VK3AML in the group. VK3BLX. Oh, good evening, Chris. Well, you're probably blushing because the last time you spoke to me was a whole week ago. I came back and had a bit of a chat after the last New Zealand video. So anyway, the handle's John, in case you've forgotten there. Not to worry, it's fine. Yeah, the quality on the 65-inch set was absolutely brilliant, really. I was concentrating on it especially through the walkthrough of the museum, the trucks in particular, and it just looks glorious. You know, it's the colour's beautiful, everything's crisp, no sign of any pixelation or dropping frames or anything like that. It just looked glorious. So whatever you're doing, it's working perfectly. Love it. Always interested to have a look at your stuff on New Zealand too. We didn't get down as far as Invercargill when my wife and I were over there. We made it down to Dunedin, but we didn't get down to Invercargill. We probably had the same problem that you mentioned, where everyone said, "Oh, don't bother visiting there," and you know, of course, you miss out on things. But maybe next time. Maybe next time. Listen, just one question. You said that that little lizardy thing, what was it? A Tuatara? Was that what it was called? And you're looking for a gland transplant. Well, I was just wondering now, are you hoping for a longer life or just extending your breeding years? You might clarify that on the next over. VK3AML, VK3BLX.
VK3BLX, VK3AML. Well, I might, but as Prue and I are both the same age and we're 67, it might be pushing the likelihood by a fair bit. But yeah, the Tuatara, they live to an incredible age, but as you might have noticed from the video, they don't move much. They don't eat much, they don't move much. Not a great deal happens in the life of a Tuatara, and, you know, nothing has happened in the life of their ancestors from, I gather, back beyond the Jurassic to the Mesozoic. The most completely uneventful animal on Earth. They're not venomous, they're not aggressive, they're not anything. And they survived only on the offshore islands of New Zealand that didn't have populations of rat, which I believe got to most of the Tuatara elsewhere on the main islands of New Zealand. And hello, Dan DTM. I think Dan, unless I'm mistaken, Dan's in Canberra. So we've got lookers in Canberra, Hobart, Paul 3HN, who was on the amateur radio video from the QRP day at the start of the video. And it's good to see those people. I'll have to take my 4K camera along to more of those amateur events to keep these Saturday night transmissions more relevant to the subject in hand, I think. I will eventually run out of videos taken on that extraordinary New Zealand tour 2 years ago. With Mike 7MJ, we organised a tour of some very interesting parts of New Zealand that people don't normally see off the normal tourist track. And I really feel, having seen Invercargill, that some of the best parts of New Zealand are not advertised, perhaps even purposely kept secret. The locals don't want the secrets known. I'm checking for dropped frames on the stream. There's been nothing dropped. So, and the CPU is up at 28%, which is still within limits. So it looks like, although I'm pushing the definition limits pretty hard on 1080p, it's still well within spec. Isn't it an amazing time that we live in? That we've gone, in my lifetime, not born in 1954, from the birth of Australian television in 1956, where each house only had one rather grotty black and white television receiver, usually with poor linearity and not all that clear, to a situation where inexpensively you can set up effectively your own television station, produce programs and radiate them. We really do live in extraordinary times. Anyway, back round to Dave, VK3ECG. A note about your father. With the Royal Enfield. Until recently, when the physical condition of his legs deteriorated, Mike 7MJ had a Royal Enfield, but of more recent Indian manufacture. And although it made noise like a threshing machine, they were a very reliable motorcycle, very basic, very few refinements, thereby not terribly technically advanced, but you could service all of the essential parts yourself, which I suppose is why they've become so popular in India. I believe they're manufactured in India rather than Europe now. England specifically. VK3 ECG and group VK3AML.
Yes, VK3AML and the group VK3 ECG. Yes, good evening, John. And yes, I could still hear Peter very faintly. He was saying us up at Belgrave on the hill up there. And yes, I did listen around a bit very quickly. I had a lot of things on today. We had 3 trees down in the storm. Fortunately, the antenna remained, which is always a bit of a risk at our place, especially when trees are flexing very heavily, and I don't really have any sort of pulley arrangements to deal with antennas in trees being stretched too much. But that all seemed to survive, thank goodness. But it has slightly reduced my options for putting a large loop in, which was going to be using at least one of the fallen over trees as part of the suspension of that. But that'll be another task for another time. Yes, I'm very amused with the story about the A35, because that was exactly my experience. I was at university at the time, and I actually learnt to drive during the Easter holiday for 4 weeks, having actually never really driven before, and passed my tests on the day I went back to university, because I was in a different place from where I lived in the UK, and eventually found an old A35, and we did it up a bit and sprayed it, and different colour on the outside from the inside, and some great occasions in that little A35. Actually, it was remarkable, and I had exactly the same experience. Didn't have the money for a new battery, so I used to start it, well, 2 ways I started. One, I was parked up on a little student hall residence, which had a car park at the top of a hill. So I would park my A35 nose down, heading to the driveway, and just put it into neutral, get it rolling, and then just let the clutch in, and it just used to start it up pretty well. But of course, if I didn't make that, then I would start it pretty much on the flat all the time with the starting handle, and the crank was my father had taught me how to do this, about how to hold it so your thumb is on the same side as your finger, so if you get a kick back, you don't break your thumb. But I got quite adept at starting it, and usually I would start it with just one flick, and that would be it. And once you got the knack, it's quite remarkable. But eventually I did sum up the money to buy myself a battery, which made life a lot easier. But it was a great little thing, and kept going. The only thing was that the handbrake was on the offside, so between the driver's seat and the driver's door. This wasn't so bad, apart from the fact that occasionally you'd catch the handbrake on your trouser leg and fall out of the car, which happened to me on several occasions. And the other feature of that was that there was supposed to be a little gaiter around the base of this handbrake, but the gaiter, which was an old leather thing, had long gone, and so you could see the road through the floor of the car as you drove along. But of course, it meant that the handbrake was immediately behind the front offside wheel, which meant if you went through a puddle, water would shoot up through the base of the handbrake and again up your trouser leg. So it was an interesting vehicle, but I suppose as a student car, it was moderately useful, let's say. So there we are. The tales of an A35, and a wonderful thing it was. On one occasion, I did drive it without a front seat while standing in it, but that's another story for another time. Yes, I was. It's very sad to hear about Bert. Yes, I just saw that on the on my phone as a quick sort of alert, just while the video was on. But Yes, not that I obviously saw him many a time from when I arrived in Australia, and but don't have the sort of the full history. I noticed actually on the QRP by the Bay that is it Joe Gonzalez, the YSP was there with his wife, and they're the couple who run the schools amateur radio club thing, which I always sort of thought was quite an interesting thing. As for the Gels Road and Columbia Park, well, I'll see what I'm up to. I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen. I've got a bit of leave next week, which is nice, and I think because of the relaxation, we're going back to our choir rehearsals on Tuesday night, so that'll be a start, which we haven't been able to have a rehearsal now for months and months and months, and we've got about, I think, a 5-week run straight up to some sort of Christmas concert at the beginning of December, so that'll be a little intensive block, which will be quite fun. Anyway, back to you, Chris. VK3AML in the group, VK3CG.
VK3CG and group VK3AML. Well, with regard to the Austin, one particular episode I remember with John, who was then VK3ZGJ, he's now VK3WG, was that he came in with us, I think myself, John, VK3BK, who is now ABC TV newsreader, Paul Higgins, and one other guy, I've forgotten the other guy's name. We all used to go into the Science Museum in Swanson Street to participate in the making of the Sunday morning news broadcast for the Wireless Institute. This would have been about 1974 or 5, maybe early 76. And the Austin that John had visors above the window. And John used to park the car in the garage, which was in a very old building infested with spiders. And I didn't think. I reached up when the sun was in my eyes to flip the visor down, and 2 bloody huntsman spiders landed in my lap. We were at and being an arachnophobe, the first thing I did was literally grab the door handle and bail out. Now, we're only doing about 5 or 10 miles an hour, so it wasn't dangerous, but the position we were in at the time was dangerous because I bailed out in the middle of the intersection of Flinders and Swanson Street, jumping up and down to get the huntsman spiders off my lap, and was approached by a policeman. I think they thought I might have been a complete lunatic who had just escaped from the Q asylum or something. But, misspent youth. Just for those who are looking on the live stream, you'll notice my cup. This is a cup, an original 1970s cup that's given to me by the widow of the late Tony Sanderson, Anna. And it's one of the gold Pyrex cups that Tony famously used to offer his very strongly brewed coffee to all visitors to his shack, active on 160 metres on Saturday night, back in the 1970s. So now, this night I thought, rather than go out and fiddle about with boiling stuff, I would use a Sanderson-style thermos flask and pour myself a continuous intravenous drip of coffee with that very cup. So here's to you, Tony, wherever you are. Now, Peter, VK3ACZ, are you still with us, Portable, or have you gone? I'll just check. VK3ACZ in group, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML in group, VK3ACZ. Yeah, I'm just making my way down. I've dismantled my portable station. The plan is I'll hope to get home and have a chat with you on the base radio if I make it back in time. Still got to pick up the evening feed, but anyway, thanks for the heads up about Bert Newton. I heard you talking about him. I didn't actually catch what happened, so I just did a quick Google search and found out for myself. So, a bit of a surprise there. But anyway, thanks again for letting me join the net, and I hope to catch you before the end of it. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
Not at all, Peter. It's always a pleasure to have you there. Very much appreciate your presence and support through the weeks. So now we'll move on to Jeff, VK3VJS. I hope you at some stage get to see the recording of the YouTube live stream, because just from the point of view of the history of trucking, that Bill Richardson's Automotive World, or whatever it's called, down in Invercargill, has the best collection of beautifully restored commercial vehicles I think I've ever seen. I mean, it's rare enough to see vintage cars of the First War period, but to see vintage trucks restored to a condition probably better than when they came off the shop floor is really something. So we'll see if Jeff is still with us. VK3VJS, are you there? VK3AML.
Just leaving a short break there. Yes, Chris, I'm about to pull the plug though on everything and head off to the virtuous couch. And I'll follow that up, Chris. And if you're ever up the southern end of the North Island, like I was a few years ago, unfortunately for my, it ended up as my elder brother Peter's funeral. And then with my brother John, we shot up to Napier, had a look around Napier for a couple of nights, and then came back. We discovered a very good automotive museum. Now, I can't think of the name of the place, the actual town, but I think it's either called Goodward or Southward Motor Museum, and it's exceptionally good. Motorbikes, cars, and even a couple of aeroplanes in it. So if you're ever in that area, have a look. You'll be in the building itself. Must have cost the owner $1 million. It's specially designed. It's just not some old shed or whatever. This is a properly designed place. Manicured lawns, driveways, curb and channel and everything, and big gates where you come off the highway. It's well worth a visit if you're interested in that sort of thing. And they had a Cord, a 1937 812 supercharged Cord in there, and of course I was enraptured. I even got the chap to lift the bonnet to have a look at the Lycoming V8 engine with the Switzer Cummins centrifugal supercharger, and I took a photo of the body number, etc., on the firewall, and looked it up in my reference book over in the library there, and there it was, whole details of it, where it went to, and it was exported to New Zealand, right-hand drive. So I was very, very happy with that. I'll never be able to afford one. The only one I've got is a plastic model in the front room, which you've seen. Anyway, Chris, another great experimental broadcast. Nota bene, experimental broadcast, which went over well. And all the best to you and Prue, and hope to see you on Tuesday. If I don't get a phone call from Mount Eliza in the meantime, we'll certainly make the effort and head up there to Columbia Park. So cheers to everyone on the frequency, and I'll say good night. VK3AML in the group, VK3VJS.
And a happy birthday to you for Tuesday too, Jeff. All the best to you. Napier, that's the famous Art Deco town that was rebuilt after the, I think it was 1931 earthquake, which levelled the original town, and they built everything in Art Deco style afterwards. It's an interesting part of the coast there. We did stay one night there must be 5 years ago now. Myself, Prue and some of her nursing colleagues, we went as a group over there and did a tour of the North Island. It's the only time I've been to the North Island. I tend more to tour in the south, not only because of the weather, but because of the spectacular scenery. North Island's great for Maori culture, particularly Rotorua, and for the volcanic mud pools and everything. But the South Island, really, that alpine scenery, we have nothing quite comes close to it. Okay, thanks for your presence, Jeff, and all the best to you. We'll probably see you Tuesday. If not, we'll chat on the radio, and I'm overdue to give you a visit, I know. But it's been impossible for 4 months because of the damn COVID thing. VK3BLX, over to you, John. VK3AML.
VK3AML on the group, VK3BLX. And good evening to the others on the side there too, Peter, Dave and Jeff. All good copy here in Mont Albert. Comments. Dave, you brought back some memories there talking about your 830, I think it was, there with the hand crank. I had an Austin Cambridge. That was my first car. And it too had a dodgy battery or starter, I can't remember, but certainly the crank came out of the boot on regular occasions. Mine, unfortunately, wasn't quite as easy to start as yours seems to have been. Maybe I didn't have the technique, or I don't know, whatever it was. I remember working up a bit of a sweat on occasions getting the damn thing started, but well, at least you could do it. Certainly, if you had a hill to park on, that was much preferable from what I can recall. But yeah, the old handle, that was the last car I ever had that could be started that way. What else did we mention? Oh, storm damage. Well, I had several fairly large branches from a neighbour's tree come down in my backyard. One of them fell across the rope that holds up the pulley on my G5 RV, so everything was sort of pulled very tight, and I eventually had to roll out about 60 metres of various ropes and cable I had, so I could use the car to pull this big branch out of the neighbour's tree into my backyard and take the weight off the rope. And tomorrow's job is to get out and cut it up and toss it over the fence. And my poor old antenna mast, which is nothing more special than a couple of lengths of water pipe, which have been standing up for about 20 years out the back, survived every storm up until now, and now it's got about a 15-degree bend at the top, so I have to figure out what to do about that now. It's certainly copped it. There's just small branches and a few larger ones just everywhere around here, around Mont Albert, Surrey Hills, and it seems like it was quite widespread, the whole thing. It must have been absolutely hurricane-like, and I slept through it all. It wasn't until I got up in the morning and the wife said, "Oh, there's a great branch in the backyard," and it turned out there was all sorts of other stuff as well. Chris, the Huntsman Spider, I'm like you. If that had happened to me, I would have jumped out, irrespective of the travelling speed. I wouldn't have been able to stop. Wouldn't have been able to control myself. I'd have been out in a flash. It's just one of those things, you can rationalise it. Yes, they're harmless and all the rest of it, but it wouldn't make any difference to me if they dropped in my lap. Yeah, okay, back to you, Chris, VK3AML, and the group, VK3BLX.
VK3BLX and group, VK3AML, yeah. I was 22, and fortunately, if I jumped out of a car, even doing 10 miles an hour, I wouldn't do any damage to myself then. Fairly agile and flexible. I think I'd probably break every bone in my body if it happened now. I don't think it can happen now because Swanson Street, I think, has been partly made a pedestrian mall. Not sure. I don't go into the city all that much now. With the COVID, I haven't been in for 4 months. I haven't been very far at all for 4 months. I think it was 5 or 15 kilometres any of us were allowed to go. And finally, when the restrictions came off a few days ago, Prue and I went up to a cafe, a bakery cafe at Ferntree Gully, and met our IT person, Andrea, who lives in Ferndale Road in Ferntree Gully. She came down and we all had coffee at a cafe for the first time in months. It felt downright strange. I'm just checking on my stream health because I'm getting these things saying the stream's current bitrate is higher than recommended. But recommended is for YouTube does, if you look very closely, cause certain artifacts to creep in. So I've put it a bit above our optimum to 7.5 or 8 megabytes per second on the 1080p stream. Probably the reason I'm getting these recommendations from YouTube is that YouTube can't be bothered storing the slightly larger file. Somewhere there must be some massive series of warehouses of just disk after disk after disk with YouTube's stored videos, particularly now that everybody's moving into 4K and 1080p. Must be an immense amount of stuff. Heaven knows how they store it. 2 hours, 18 minutes, and not a single drop frame. I'm very happy. Now, the Austins. Yeah, unreliable brakes is one thing I remember about it. But this is, 1974-75, you didn't, I don't think at that time you had to get a roadworthy certificate. So any old bomb could be driven out in the street with impunity. So if the brakes were a bit off, you made very sure if you had it parked on a steep hill that the car wasn't aimed at anything expensive. I saw that happen once on Battery Point, which is very hilly in Hobart. A friend had a little Skoda delivery van. Skoda now isn't too bad a brand, Swedish I think, but in the 60s and 70s they were the pits. They were like a Trebbi from East Germany, badly built, and this girl who rented a room in the same house I was in, we were in a group dwelling, a lot of us going to the Tas Uni, had this Skoda parked on a hill, and it decided to give up on its brakes while it was parked one day, and we're all sitting down having a very quiet cup of coffee in the dining room, which is fronted onto this street, Colville Street, and we just heard down the road, crash, and the Skoda had broken free of its moorings. The handbrake didn't hold, and it collided with the safety barrier, so-called, at the end of Colville Street, stoving its front end and both headlights from memory. And they did recover the delivery van, but it was never quite the same again. It was one of those tiny delivery vans that was designed for delivering bread and very light stuff, I think. Skoda. Does that brand still exist? I don't know. I think it does. Carbide lights. As I understand, now Dave 3ECG with his chemistry background would be able to tell me, you used to buy the carbide crystals or something under paraffin oil, and you would put the crystals into, I think, water, and it would produce this exothermic reaction which produced a lot of gas, and I think the gas was acetylene, and that was what you would light. I think that's the way it worked, or it was calcium carbide or something odd that produced hydrogen or acetylene. I'm not quite sure. Dave, you might be able to fill us in. You know a lot more about chemistry than I. VK3ECG and group VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML, VK3ECG. Yes, that's vaguely what I understand. It's a calcium carbide and water. And my father described it was water dripping onto the crystals, but producing the acetylene gas, which was lit and so on. So that's how he described it to me. But basically, it's acetylene is just a product of the carbide and water. So, and I think you adjusted the production of the gas by the rate at which the water dripped on it, I think. But as I said, this is partly just I remember my father telling me about the sagas of having to light these lamps, and of course the issue being that most young men never bothered to do it unless they absolutely had to. So hence it was a pain to do, so they didn't, and therefore they were driving around a lot without their lights on, which may or may not have been a significant thing, but certainly attracted the attention of the constabulary from time to time, I gather. But there we are. Yes, I mean, it has been amazing. I got out into the city last week, just before the Friday thing. I had to walk into the intercity from South Bank where I work and do a couple of things, and it was pretty empty then, amazing. Whereas I decided I wasn't going to do anything on Friday evening, and there was some crazy people up till midnight going around the shops and hitting them and so on. I drove my wife over to Spotlight in Bayswater today to have a look at some of the craft stuff and all the bits and pieces that she hasn't been able to get to in the last little while. And on the way back, we stopped off in a nice little one of those little suburban restaurants actually in Ringwood, which is absolutely beautiful place. And it's not the sort of place you'd imagine to have a really lovely restaurant. It's just one of those little domestic suburb strips of 8 shops or something like that, with the hairdresser and newsagents and stuff like that. And but it's an amazingly great restaurant, and we hadn't been to it for months and months and months. And so we just stopped off and had a little brunch quietly, and it was a very nice day, and getting out and about, but not being in the places that were too crowded, which was the nice thing about it, because I still don't trust all the processes yet, and I'm just waiting till I can get my booster. I'm sure I'm fine, but having had my double shots, but I'm now coming up to, I think I've 5 months now, because I had one of the early sets. So I think on the 1st of December I will probably be okay to get my booster. So by that time, hopefully there'll be lots of Pfizer around, and then I'll have had a little bit of AstraZeneca and the protein ones, and then move on to the mRNA Pfizer, and hopefully the combination will give me a good boost. The base thing just is not that you won't get infected, but if you do, you get a very, very minimal illness, and in fact, many people saying it's really just having a mild fever and feel like I had a bit of a cold. That's how people have described it, just for a day or so, who've actually been vaccinated and had the illness. But as you probably saw my Facebook, Chris, I put up a video we had from work, which we produced because to deal with all the issues we're getting of people that it's not real and doesn't cause any problems and things like that. So actually my wife sorted out the video and put it into Canva, and we put a few bits and pieces around it just to make it a bit more attractive up on the work YouTube channel. So hope whether it'll have any effect or not, or just fire people up, I suspect. But I think you've got to keep saying it, because otherwise things disappear into people's memories and say, well, didn't get it, so they've kind of been that bad after all. So not letting that stay public. The truth needs to be said from our perspective at least. Anyway, back to you, Chris. VK3AML in the group, VK3ECG.
Did we have a breaker there? I heard a couple of low-down heterodynes during, just briefly during Dave's over. Is somebody else trying to call in? No, doesn't look like anybody's trying to call in. But as Dave lives in Warrandyte, there are certain areas that he doesn't get through to so well. So, yeah. Storm damage, very little here. I saw the Diamond X7000 waving about quite a bit, but it seems to have a bit of flex in it, which is probably a good thing. And it's on a steel mast that's nested 1 1/4 inch steel pipe within a 1 1/2 inch steel pipe. And very strong in terms of bolting to the house and to the fire escape stairs at the back. So it's it is guide, but even without the guys it'd be fairly stable, being steel rather than aluminium. So no damage to the antennas here, but the inverted L collected a few twigs and whatnot, you know, Y-shaped pieces of twig and branch dropping onto the wire, and I'll have to shake the wire a bit to get the damn things clear of that. As long as they're not across one of the insulators, I'll be right. But what I don't want to do is to put 100 watts of AM up the inverted L, and at the far end with the high voltage point find that a twig in a gum tree that's across the insulator catches fire, taking the whole bloody tree with it. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but I've seen Laurel and Hardy films too often not to. Okay, let's see if Peter... I'm sorry. Let's see if Peter 3ACZ is back with us yet. I must try this thermos flask of coffee on a regular basis. I normally have to forego it if I have to give a running commentary over the videos while I'm radiating them, as I did tonight. So I couldn't get to the stove in the other room to make the coffee, so having the thermos there is a good idea, and I thank Tony Sanderson, the late Tony Sanderson, in absentia for explaining by example tonight why he had a thermos in his ham shack all the time. VK3ACZ, Peter, are you with us again yet? VK3AML. Peter's not back yet. So, VK3BLX. John, are you still with us?
Yeah, oh yes, still here. Can't get rid of me that easily. I have a couple of comments. Poor old Bert Newton. I'm not too sure it was all that much of a surprise, given that he had part of his leg amputated about 6 months ago, from what I can remember, due to some very nasty infection. So when that starts to happen to you, I guess you're getting into dangerous waters. He certainly had a long career in entertainment, didn't he? Gosh, ever since I was a kid, he was around. Skoda's around, certainly. I think they're the one of the main sponsors of the some of the cycling tours, particularly the Tour de France. So when watching replays of that, they're always talking about the Skodas. Dave, I was just wondering what the YouTube channel, or was it Facebook, or was it both that you mentioned where the debunking video resides. Wouldn't mind having a look. Other than that, nothing much more to add this round anyway. VK3AML on the group, VK3BLX.
Yeah, VK3BLX, VK3AML. Glad to hear that the Skoda's still about. Swedish firm. I had the feeling that their early product was shoddy, but it was improving. And Swedish steel has always had a good reputation. Don't know why. I don't think there's any iron produced by Sweden. It must be their refining techniques that are involved. So, round to VK3ECG to explain on that video. Was it purely Facebook? VK3ECG and group VK3AML?
Yeah, VK3AML and group VK3ECG. Yes, John. Yes, it's. If you look up, I'm trying to think what's the best way to look it up. Yes, if you just do a search on YouTube and just put in V Victor IFM, Victor India, what was say, or if I should do it properly, really, Victorian Institute, Forensic Medicine, anyway. And if you look there, there's a YouTube channel for the institute, and it'll be up on that. Channel. It's the one that went up a couple of days ago, or whatever, or a day ago, or something like that. So that's where you'll see it. It's very short, but it's just to make the point, really. We've had a few people doing some media things recently, but yeah, that's all it is. I think the Skodas were Czech, if I remember rightly. You're thinking perhaps Chris of Saab, but Skodas were Czech, and they were definitely Eastern European, very, very poor quality. And then, of course, they've more recently been based, a lot of them, around the platforms for the Volkswagen, and they're, in fact, I think their new electric car, the Enyaq or something, has supposed to be very good, but I don't think it comes to Australia. Most of these things don't come to Australia. Very few are coming. Just our market just isn't big enough, I think. But it's got a very good reputation now, and indeed, I think people are comparing it very favourably with its sort of parent company as well. In terms of the design and the way they've distinguished their particular models, but interesting, and certainly it was sort of, I think we used to refer to it as a sewing machine on wheels. Certainly when I was young, that seemed to be the general reference. They were cheap, cheerful, and very, very unreliable at that time, but not so now. Back to you, Chris. VK3AML, the group VK3ECG.
Yeah, the delivery van looked a little bit like, white goods that grew wheels. I can't describe it any other way. And it had those sort of curved surfaces that you associate more with the streamlined modern of the 1940s. It was almost as if they were still using patterns that were fashionable in 1945 on a car made in the mid-60s. Volkswagen had rather a better reputation right through that period. I mean, the car was designed by Ferdinand Porsche and the Führer. How could it be any problem? Although I was once in a VW that was a fairly old VW that an ex-girlfriend of mine was driving, and we were doing the trip to Adelaide. This is about 1979. And about 20 kilometres out of Robe in South Australia, it dropped its fan belt. And when a VW Beetle drops its fan belt, you have to stop, otherwise the whole motor seizes. And that meant that I had to walk into Robe, which would have been normally okay. The temperature that day was 103. By the time I got into Robe, I looked like a sponge that all of the moisture had been wrung out of and was dripping everywhere. Felt similarly. And I don't know whether my first trip should have been to the local hospital or to the local garage to get a new fan belt. But fortunately, we found a garage. I walked into a garage that had a fan belt. The guy first question to me was, "What do we service, your car or you?" Anyway, ancient history. What else we got here? Bert Newton. Yeah, I think he started on Channel 7 with a hi-fi show when he was about 18, and that would have been about 1957, just after the start of television. I've seen clips of Kinney recordings of it, and then later on IMT. I think Bert's great advantage was he always was number 2 announcer on IMT, never, or very rarely the front man. And from that point of view, he wasn't so reliant on audience reaction and ratings. He was a reliable, and I think the television stations knew that, particularly in the latter part of his career. So yeah, it's a sad loss. And the last time I saw him on a live television show, or something that had been recently recorded, was an episode of Who Do You Think You Are, where they went into his background and his antecedents. Of course, he was from a strong Catholic family. They traced him back, I think, to England, and gave him a lot of his background. But he was limping, and he was looking bloated, like somebody whose liver or kidneys weren't working properly. And the thing I noticed was, compared to his normal high-level repartee self, he was coming back with monosyllabic answers to questions, which was not characteristic. And I saw that transmission about 6 months ago. So I thought, I wonder how many more times we'll see him. Well, the answer was that was the last time. VK3ACZ, are you back with us yet, Peter? VK3AML. Nope, looks like we've lost Peter. So VK3BLX, VK3AML.
VK3AML, VK3BLX. Getting a bit quiet out there. Yeah, I'm running out of things to talk about. I suppose the only thing I could recount, and I suppose you've heard it, but I'll say it anyway, the story about the guy in West Germany, a commentary on the efficiency of the West German government of manufacturing and other sectors back in the Cold War times. The guy saves and saves, and he works and he saves till he's got enough money to buy a Trabant. And he goes to the car, showroom, whatever they had, and he picks out the one he wants, and he hands over his money and orders it. And the guy who's serving says, "Oh, it's fantastic. Well, I've got good news. You're only going to have to wait 15 months for delivery. It's not bad at all." And of course, the poor guy's not too impressed with this. And the salesman says, "Now, hang on a second. I'll give you the exact date. You can pick it up on Thursday, the 14th of March, a year and a half from now. How's that?" And the guy thinks for a minute. He says, "Oh, no, that's no good. That's the day the plumber's coming." VK3AML, VK3BLX.
Oh, yes, the GDR, the German Democratic Republic. There's an amateur a German amateur that I know in Melbourne, VK3 GDR, and I suspect he's got that call sign as a bit of a self-deprecating joke. But certainly, when the wall came down and the two Germanys reunited, it's interesting to see what's happened to the East. It could have potentially been a financial disaster for the West, but the two halves of Germany seem to have fused with remarkably few problems, perhaps thanks to Angela Merkel. I just hope the next people in charge of Germany will be as skillful. What else is there to remark on? Not a great deal. I might start to cut it short if we have no more people coming in, and I've taken a note of the VIFN YouTube channel, Dave, and again I'll mention for those who might be latecomers, there's a gathering of hams that Tom VK3FTOM has informally declared for Cup Day, 2nd of November, this coming Tuesday, at 10 a.m, Columbia Park, Gels Road, Wheelers Hill. There has been a previous gathering up there, a couple of them I think, that Tom has organised. It appears there are a couple of hams around Melbourne. Tom is one, Peter Parker 3YE is the other, who organise, just announce a date and a place, and the hams do the rest. With Peter's one, certainly show and tell goes on, with people bringing equipment to show that they've either built themselves or adapted from some older piece of equipment, and that can be very interesting. And Peter's Chelsea by the Bay QRP Day has gradually grown until now, when he declares them, as long as the weather's good, you can rely on at least 20 people turning up. I hope the Gels Park one does as well. VK3ECG and group, can you think of anything else to throw in, Dave, before we wrap it? VK3ECG and group, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML, VK3ECG. Well, I think Peter was going to pick up some food, wasn't he, on the way back, and so he may have taken a little longer to get back, but I think I'm running out of things at the moment as well. My only VW story was I actually learned to drive on a 6-volt VW, which was really interesting. They were one of the early ones. I think it might have been 1 year younger than I was, but had running balls falling off and things like that, which you're absolutely right. As soon as you lost the fan belt, it was an absolute disaster, and they would overheat very, very rapidly. And they actually, was a modification. You could put a supercharger on them. Extraordinary idea to put a supercharger on a Beetle, but apparently it was really just a little pump that sat above the carburetor and was an extension of the fan belt. So the fan belt went round that as well and pressurised the input, but was a very, I think, unreliable and probably reduced the lifespan of the engine considerably. The only other thing I remember out it was the clutch cable used to break quite regularly just beneath the pedals, where literally the pedals were just on a bar, and on the other side of the bar of the clutch pedal was a hook, and on that hook was a little metal eyelet on the end of a steel cable which ran to the clutch at the back of the car, and occasionally you put your foot on the clutch and there'd be a ping, and the eyelet thing come out of the cable come out of the eyelet, and that would be it. You had to get a new clutch cable, unless you could double declutch and drive the car without a clutch, which on one occasion my father managed to do to get the car back, so which is quite impressive. But it had the sort of gearbox where you could just keep pushing the gear lever until it went in, and you just had to get the engine revs right. But he managed successfully to drive it back quite a way actually with no clutch, which was always rather impressive, I thought. Yep. Well, I don't think I've got much else. I'll put it back to you, Chris, and perhaps just see if Peter has got back, but otherwise I'll probably call it a day as well. Thanks very much for this evening, though. Fantastic video. Really enjoyed that particular museums and so on. That was absolutely wonderful. Back to you then, VK3AML from VK3ECG.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I only wish that YouTube ran 4K on YouTube Live. 1080p is the maximum it will do at the moment, according to the YouTube's own statement. I suspect it's to limit their own need for cache, rather than being a inherent technical problem. With the present speed that I've measured, in most cases I might be able to run 4K, but it would be right on the edge of what I can do. The webcam I'm using is 1080p strictly, but the Sony AX53 can run 4K with no trouble at all. And usually when I make these streams of a Saturday night, I will run off a 4K version as well, which I may eventually upload to supplement the live stream that we've already got, which does suffer a little bit of digital compression between my edited 1080p stream and live YouTube. I've just noticed when comparing the two side by side on my computer afterwards, there is a little bit, not very much, of detectable deterioration in the definition of areas of equal luminance, I suppose you'd call it. For example, in a grassy field blowing in the wind, on the original 4K video you'll see every blade of grass. Likewise on the 1080p, but when it goes to YouTube live stream, the individual blades tend to blend together into an overall green mass. Just in parts of the picture, it's just enough to be slightly annoying. And that's why today I've upped the bit rate by about 50% just to see what happens. I'll be interested to see the video recording afterwards. And hello to Paul 3HN on the text chat. Paul, I can never remember the name of the guy that you talked to on 80 metres AM, who was on that video as well, with his home-built Class D AM transmitter, who you talked to, I think lives in Mount Eliza. Wayne, I think, is his first name, but I'm not sure. But I can't recall the call sign. So if you can correct that on the text chat, I might be able to put it in. I see since midnight the numbers have been dropping off too, so we must be getting boring. I'll hand it round for a final, with a pause, to VK3BLX. We can tie the ribbons now, I think, with impunity. VK3BLX and group, and thanks for coming up, John. Sorry that my memory slipped on your name initially, but it's great that you're making a regular thing of it. VK3BLX and group with a pause. VK3AML.
VK3AML on the group, VK3BLX, nothing heard in the pause. So it looks like David hasn't got back on the radio. He's probably tucking into a nice meal if he's smart. Yeah, well, nothing else from here. Thank you very much for a very interesting video. And as I say, on the big screen, I only went in there when you had the museum video going. I was just watching out here on the iPad to start with. But I thought, oh dear, this looks good. I better go and have a look on the big screen. And sure enough, I wasn't disappointed, particularly when you were stationary in front of something, so there was no hand movement. It was just crisp and brilliant, really, really nice. So, yeah, I'll certainly endeavour to pop up every Saturday. It's always interesting and enjoyable, so, yeah, I'll make an effort. Good evening to everybody else, David, Peter, and Jeff. Nice to talk, and see you all again. VK3AML and the group, VK3BLX is clear. Cheers.
All the best, John. Have we got anybody else to chip in before we close? VK3AML.
3ACZ is back.
Ah, Peter, g'day. How are you going? Where did you go? What's the story?
Oh, I've just plunked all the gear down, turned the radio on, and here I am. Well, the story was there was a contest this afternoon, HF contest, and I liked the contest. I wouldn't enter one formally, but I always try to get a few little DX contacts to see how the signal's getting out, and I told Sandra I'd just be a couple of hours. The QR Mary's too bad at home, so I go up the hill out the back of Belgrave there to a quiet place away from all the man-made hash and noise and all that, and it was going gangbusters tonight. I just couldn't believe it. Like I think I said to you when I was on the portable, I've been to England, Scotland, Poland, and a few other places in Europe, Finland and all that on 10 metres. But if anything, the bands were too crowded, and it ended up a bit of an ordeal, even though I spent a lot more hours at it than I would have liked to. I did plan to be back in time for your broadcast. But I suppose the good thing about it is that if it had just been your transmission on 147475, it's gone. But I can at my leisure go back and watch the YouTube stream, and that's going to be fantastic. From what I heard of everybody else's rave reviews, it's going to be something to look forward to. But anyway, I used to wonder what it's like to be at sunspot maximum. Now I'm not so. I'm not so thrilled about the idea, because every station I worked, there were 2 or 3 other people on the same frequency, and they were all stacked a couple of hundred kilohertz apart and all that, up and down 40, 20, 15 and 10. In fact, 15 didn't shut down. It didn't go quite after dark like I would have expected. So anyway, that's been my story. You've had a good evening of it. And one more thing about the FTOM's get-together on Cup Day. I think Sandra has something planned for me, but it'd be good if I could call in later. is it the same place? It's a football ground attached to a school. Back to you, Chris. VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
I don't particularly remember the school, but it's called Columbia Park, Columbia, Columbia Park, Gels Road, Wheelers Hill. Does that sound like the right one?
Yeah, it does. Okay, well, I've been there once before, so I will endeavour to make it at some stage or other. That'll be good to meet up with a few people and even put some faces to other voices, as I've done on the couple of other occasions. We've had the Ham Fest at Moorabbin and a couple of meetings. Well, I met you at Gels Park for the first time too, so yeah, okay, well, that'll give me something else to look forward to. But anyway, forgive me for asking the probably the most insulting of questions, but what did I miss tonight? Just to give me a bit of a spoiler for when I sit and watch it tomorrow there, Chris. Back to you.
Okay, well, we started with a 15-minute coverage and edit of a video that I originally shot in 4K of Peter Parker's QRP by the Bay at Victory Park, Chelsea, and I shot that in February 2020, just before the first lockdown. He said, hiccuping. What's in this coffee anyway? Good. It's good black coffee. That's maybe the trouble taking it this time of night. So we had 15 minutes worth of Peter Parker's QRP by the Bay with various people, including Jeff, VK3VJS, and several other people you'd know on it. And then for 1 hour and 15 minutes after that, I ran a video of the tour of the south coast of the South Island of New Zealand that VK7MJ and I did, starting at Nugget Point on the eastern side of the Catlins, going through Owaka. We went to a museum there, a folk museum, a very good one. Then across Tutuku Bay, which had been a whaling station back in the 1830s, facing south, facing the Antarctic. Beautiful, broad, golden beach, but water that is so cold you would not want to swim there. Across to Fort Rose, and then to Invercargill. In Invercargill we visited 3 automotive museums, 2 dealing with motorcycles, including the Burt Munro World's Fastest Indian Museum, with the original World's Fastest Indian motorcycle, and then to Bill Richardson's Transport World with its extensive collection of some hundreds of commercial vehicles, trucks, and that sort of stuff, going back to about the year 1907. Finally, a trip down to the port of Bluff, with Bluff Hill, where you can, in a 360-degree view, see the whole of the south coast of the South Island of New Zealand from a reasonable height. So that's southern, extreme south of New Zealand, and QRP by the Bay is the answer to that. Want to make a final, Dave? VK3ECG and group VK3AML.
Yeah, fine. Yep. I was just thinking. So, where do you actually go, Peter, when you go up in the out on your porter operations? Is it across as I'm trying to think on the map where it would be. You're further out from that park area, but there's the Dandenong. Is it? I'm not sure what it is now. Is it? You're not actually near Gels Park itself, are you? Or do you go up that way, or do you go further up onto the near the Aero Club or those sorts of places? I just wonder where you go to. but glad you got back all right and able to get a meal. Back to you quickly, but I was saying cheerio now and getting off to bed myself, so just listen to your sort of finals, and then I shall say cheerio. Back to you then, just quickly, Peter, VK3ACZ and the group VK3ECG.
Yeah, 3ECG from 3ACZ. Yeah, thanks for the question, Dave. It's between, Belgrave South. It's a bit of parkland. It's right next to the Churchill National Park, so it would almost be Listerfield, but it's just somewhere that it's away from everything electrical. Well, except there is an electric fence which pulses occasionally, but it's not switched on all the time. So, yeah, a nice little... remote enough to be quiet, but not so remote that I don't get people walking their dogs past or riding their bikes past and come over and annoy me for half an hour wanting an explanation of what I'm doing. But anyway, yeah, cheers and 7-3 to you all. I'll still be listening in case Chris wants to hand it back to me, but I will hand it back to Chris. Cheers and 7-3 Dave, VK3AML on the group VK3ACZ.
Yeah, cheers to both of you, and sincere thanks for coming up, and I'm delighted to see that all of our internet problems, which obviously were hardware related with the cable from the street to the modem and the modem itself, both of which have been replaced, have relieved us of all of our problems, because I really wasn't looking forward to changing Telstra, because Telstra doesn't have a plan with unlimited download. Optus does, and with this sort of live streaming, you don't want to have limited downloads. You could run into some strange problems. I see the delay on our YouTube live stream is 30 seconds from the OBS software, and probably some more seconds thrown in by the trip to YouTube and back. So I'm expecting that the latency on this will still be about 45 seconds or something. Okay. VK3BLX, do you want to tie the ribbons? VK3AML. I think he's gone. Would anybody else like to have a final say? VK3 Alpha Mike Lima standing by. Looks like it. Anyway, Peter, thanks for that. Thank you, Dave. And it's 2:59 and 15 seconds since I came on. So if I give it another 30 seconds, I'll have 3 hours in round figures, and I can take a good night's sleep and a bit of a break. I must say it's a bit of a scramble to get the editing done on Friday and Saturday, because you can imagine editing 90 minutes worth of original 4K video down to 1080p and chopping out all of the bad bits. And believe me, I shoot a lot of bad stuff. Panning shots where I lose my balance and stumble and the panning shot goes askew, or the focus doesn't focus properly, or something like that. So there's a lot of stuff that hits the cutting room floor, I can assure you. And it's just on 3 hours. So this is VK3AML with the Saturday night test transmission and the QSO following. Thanking you all for coming up. Hoping to hear from everybody next Saturday at 9:30 p.m. when we have the next instalment. And I shall certainly dig out a bit more of the ham radio footage that I've shot in years gone by. There's a lot that I haven't yet edited together and presented. I might even find some stuff on film from the 70s, so watch out. VK3AML now, clear but listening. And thank you to
Yeah, quick one, Chris. Thanks for the overview of what I've got to look forward to when I watch the program. And I've been to Nugget Point. That was the furthest south I ever got. But anyway, cheers and 7-3. If I don't catch you at the Shoebrook meeting, I'll probably, or hope to see you at Columbia Park. Cheers and good night, Chris. VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
Thanks a lot, Peter. I'll say good night on the YouTube live stream now and close. Okay, we'll see you possibly Monday night, but more likely Tuesday. I think the preparations for Tuesday with all of the slow scan gear is going to take a bit of time. All the best. VK3AML now clear. Okay, and thank you to the people on the live stream. I'm just looking down the list. Mick swinging the beam. Good God, that's not Metal Mick, surely. From my CB days, my late but not lamented late CB days. Gosh, Mick. The 11 element beam in Pascoe Vale South. Gosh. And Terry, nice to see you there. I think we're down to 7 viewers on the stream, so I'll now cut it short. All the best, people. Thank you for your reception, and it's interesting to see that a 7.5...
VK3AML, VK3FTJ, you there, Chris?
Yes, Terry, hi.
There you go. There's a picture of your broadcast on my Facebook to you, mate. So if you want to have a look at that, yeah, you can see a picture of what the actual video looks like.
Good-o, I'll have a look. From what I hear, the definition is well up to 1080p spec. All the best. We'll catch you on Facebook probably, Terry, very soon. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima now clear.
73 Chris. Enjoy your night and have a good rest, mate.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, I am a bit...
And thanks again.
I am a bit on the rooted side, I must say. It's now, what, 12:34 a.m. and Sunday. Okay, all the best, people. I'll now terminate the video stream and thank everybody who was up on the text chat as well as those on the air. We'll catch you next week, if not before.